poet is a faker, who's so good at his act, he even fakes the pain of pain he feels in fact. And those who read his words will feel in his writing neither of the pain he has, but just the one they're missing. And so around its track, this thing called a heart winds, a little clockwork train to entertain our minds. The title of this video comes from a quote by a Portuguese poet named Fernando Pessoa. I'd like to talk about him because he can peculiarly be considered the four greatest Portuguese poets of the 20th century. And he happened to be the four greatest Portuguese poets of the 20th century because he wrote under several different heteronyms. And the heteronyms are a bit like pseudonyms, only they are the exact opposite actually. Because while a pseudonym is a different name for the same writer, a heteronym is the same writer writing under several different personalities. And so at least 23, as far as we know, and we keep on finding more. The main, though, a man called Alberto Queiro, who was a very simple man, very different from Pessoa, who believed things were what they were, and they were nothing more than that. A rock was a rock, a flower was a flower, and he was happy. He was happy by that state of affairs. When he actually was against questioning, because he thought that brought unhappiness. Then there was another one called Ricardo Reis. That one was a pagan who believed in Greek gods and in fate, and they got on quite well with Cairo because they both loved nature so much. But he was quite melancholic and constantly worried by how nothing lasted in this world. He was a very sad person. And then finally there was Álvaro de Campos, a deeply emotional man, a man that tended to go on whims that varied between highly excitable and deeply melancholic moods. He wanted to have the world in himself or in the same time be alone. He was a very interesting figure. But all of these people, as I mentioned before, lived inside one man who was Fernando Pessoa. He was a poet, a writer, and a literary critic. But most of the time, he was a translator. He worked in an office. He also, by the end of his life, became involved in occultism for obvious reasons. Because when a man lives with so many people inside him, with so many personalities, a part of him probably ends up believing they are real. And let's face it, most of us, well, scholars treat each and every heteronym as a separate writer and as a real person. And they all had biographies, and they all had dates of birth, and they had all places where they live. So they were actually real people, only they didn't exist in the typical sense of existence. So, as I was saying, by the final of his life, by around 1930 or so, he became involved in occultism. He actually became quite, not quite close, but very close of, a very close friend of Aleister Crowley, and he even helped him fake a suicide when he visited Portugal. Then, by 1935, he finally died, and his final words were written on a note. They were in English because I'll put a link to his page on Wikipedia, so if you want to check some more stuff about him, you can, and it's worth it, believe me. Um, but he spoke English because he was raised in an English colony for most of his childhood, and he was fluent in English. But his final words were, "I know not what tomorrow will bring," which are very simple words, but at the same time at least I find them quite deep, quite meaningful. O poeta é um fingidor. Finge tão completamente que chega a fingir que é dor, a dor que deveras sente. E o esquelenho que escreve, na dor lida sentem bem, não as duas que ele teve, mas só aqueles não têm. E assim, nas calhas da roda, gira a entreter a razão, esse comboio de corda que se chama o coração.